All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the brain injury discussion. This is Jay, the case manager. I hope you all are having a wonderful day. And we're going to talk about probably a very important topic that doesn't get a lot of talk about it. We're talking about hypoglycemia and brain injury. Now, hypo, which is low, glycemia meaning glucose, which we're talking about low blood sugar today. Now, this will entail talking about diabetes and what this has to do with the brain, as well as other body systems that regulate the sugar inside the body, as the brain does require uh, some level of glucose to be maintained to run. Just like a car engine, one of the things that really stands out is that, yes, you need gasoline in a car, or you need a fuel source in a car. Um, and without that fuel source, the engine doesn't run. Now, unlike an automobile, the human body is running constantly until unfortunate death, but the human body requires that energy constantly, and the endocrine system works with the digestive system or the gastrointestinal system to make the energy that supplies and is carried by the vascular system up to the brain. But anyways, let's get into this because this is going to be interesting. So, what do we know about diabetes? Well, according to this source I found that was in 2023, there's a source down there. Of course, sources will be in the description below. Um, it is a very common illness. It's not the most common, but it is a very common illness. It is a chronic illness. So this will be, once you get it for the rest of your life. So this is a very serious thing. Now, worldwide, there have been over 500 million people affected by diabetes. And again, this is a problem with the regulation of blood sugar. You've probably seen advertisements on TV, on your phone about diabetic medications or uh, blood sugar medications, or maybe this new tool to monitor your blood sugar. Again, this is very common. We're talking about blood glucose levels. So again, this is about how sweet your blood is. And of course, most of the time they're talking about type 2, which is not necessarily insulin dependent, but it talks about a lack of ability of the pancreas to be able to regulate and keep blood sugar down. It also can be type 1, which is less common, but it's where that place in the pancreas called the Isle of Langerhans, which produces the insulin, either does not work or is non-existent or otherwise, but type 1 is insulin dependent. So keep that in mind moving forward. We're mainly in this video talking about type 1 diabetics. Not necessarily type 2, although type 2 diabetics can certainly get low blood sugar, which, again, not necessarily a huge uh, concern concerning the hypoglycemic blood brain injury, but this can happen with them too. So, again, this is more about trying to get an idea of what's going on and why we should care. So, with that being said, let's move on. So, the technical term is diabetes mellitus. It is a endocrine disorder. So endocrine, which controls stuff like the thyroid, also controls your hormones and other sort of chemicals that are in the body that help either initiate or take down certain things. The endocrine system is connected to the brain. So it's an endocrine disorder that affects the pancreas, which, as you can see in this graphic, it is highlighted here in red. So you now have this ability to see via the X-ray, by this image, where it is in the body. Now, the pancreas is where insulin is made, and it also helps with blood glucose regulation, and it keeps it at a normal level. Now, again, that normal level might be different for people, might be different if you have diabetes, might be different, but this does require part of the fueling that goes into the brain. So when you see a NASCAR driver go into that pit stop and they get refueled, um, think about your pancreas, how your pancreas refuels your glucose levels in your blood, which is carried to the brain by the vascular system. But this picture, if you can see, it has the digestive system or the gastrointestinal system. You see the stomach, and you also see the intestines, both large and small intestines, and all of that helps absorb that raw energy into the bloodstream, and then your it helps absorb that, and then your pancreas creates insulin that helps convert it from something that the body can't use into something that the body can use. For example, if you drive a gasoline car, it doesn't run just strictly off of the liquid itself. It has to be compressed before it can be used. So again, think about your pancreas as not just fueling the car, because that's like your gastrointestinal system, but think about it more like a fuel pump. Think about it as something that's like an atomizer, or something that converts it from a raw material into something that can be used as fuel. So, but let's move on and talk about low blood sugar, or the scientific term, hypoglycemia. So hypoglycemia, if we break this word down, is hypo, which means low, and glycemia means glucose, or sugar, or energy. So hypo, which is low, glycemia, low blood sugar. And again, this can be kind of crucial to the body's natural function. Now, again, we see this more in type 1 diabetics or insulin-dependent diabetics. Um, we're talking low glucose levels. Um, and again, when something is starved of necessary nutrients, it can lead to cellular death. And in the brain, especially, it can lead to permanent damage. And again, those cells require that glucose to run and to maintain and to stay alive. So you're going to need that glucose to make sure that, yes, your brain does require this in order to physically function. And so some of the signs of what you might see when it comes to someone who may be going into hypoglycemia. Now, again, this is usually a type 1 diabetic, not type 2, but can happen. But what might signs show when there's a glucose deficiency in going on? Well, you're probably going to see behavioral changes. You're probably going to see some physical consequences. Maybe they'll lose consciousness. It might be some of the symptoms. Well, they might be hungry. Talking about behavior changes, they might be confused. They might not know where they're at. They might be asking some questions. Maybe they'll be dizzy. Okay, if a car is, think about a car that's sputtering out because it's low on fuel. Well, same thing could be happening here with the low on fuel for the brain. They might have an attitude change. They might be grumpy. Well, I mean, I'd probably be grumpy if I was hungry too. But, that might be the brain's telling, the bystanders around them, hey, something is wrong. Maybe because they have a headache. Well, a headache sounds like it's something that might be sugar related in the bloodstream to the head. They might become sweaty, they might become shaky. All of that could be signs. And again, like if you know someone that's close to you, like I have a couple of friends who are type 1 diabetic, I know the signs to look for. So it helps me, and I'm able to have that conversation with them because I'm their friend. At one point, might have been their Navy corpsman, but um, one of the things I've noticed is that usually there will be signs, and usually it boils down to the behavior and other sort of physical consequences. So it's something to keep an eye out on because you never know what might happen. And so it brings us to this next term called hypoglycemic encephalopathy. Now, again, we already covered hypoglycemic, but what is encephalopathy? So let's break that down. Apathy or encephalopathy, or philopathy was talks about a disease process. So that means something's wrong. And ceph or CEFH, cephalosis, think about that, cephalitis. So this is talking about the brain and also the head. So hypoglycemic encephalopathy. I found a really good source here. If you want that continuing reading, I would encourage it. But what is hypoglycemic encephalopathy? Well, it is a metabolic illness that affects the brain. It's talking about glucose deprivation, brain dysfunction due to fuel starvation. So that brain is wanting that fuel to operate and operate properly, right? Now, again, this picture here could save someone's life. You might need a lancet, you might need a test strip and you might need that blood glucose monitor, right? Um, Again, I don't think some people, if they're acting weird, you might say, "Oh, maybe we should test your sugar." It's not a bad idea, but especially if they're at risk for something like this. And so, again, these and the effects of this can range. So the extreme cases, for example, if they're alone and you find them, they might be unconscious or possibly they might end up in a coma because of hypoglycemic encephalopathy. Some of the more mild ones, for example, if you catch them, they're with a friend group, they might have some transient neurological effects. But then again, this all ties in with fuel starvation of the brain. And again, fuel starvation for a car engine is not necessarily a good idea, and neither is fuel starvation for your brain. So your insulin creates that fuel for your brain, and that's important. And so to kind of wrap this all up in a bow, right? You'll notice me talking about a lot of preventative measures because the best brain injury is the one that you can prevent. Ideally, I would love to be able to fix these things, but then again, brain injuries are unique and different. So again, this is not necessarily a very common brain injury, but it's still dangerous to the brain. It can still happen. Um, the range of injury effects might determine whether you visually see these the neurological or cognitive deficits, um, or maybe you don't. Usually it's with type 1 diabetics. Someone that, you might notice they're wearing a continuous blood glucose monitor on their arm. Maybe they are checking their insulin pump. Again, that stuff can happen. Obviously, prevention, if you can prevent yourself from getting into a situation where you might be in low blood sugar, if you're at risk for it, that might be a good idea if you think about it. But um, obviously, you want to take care of your nutrition. You want to fuel the body. The body isn't just there to taste things, it's there to fuel the body. That's the gastrointestinal system. And it not only fuels the body, it also fuels the brain. Isn't that wonderful? We have to think about food as fuel, fuel for the body and the brain. And this is possibly an overlooked brain injury that a lot of people don't usually think about because thankfully, there are technologies such as continuous glucose monitors or CGMs. There's insulin pumps. There's a whole range of technologies around managing diabetes and managing blood sugar that fortunately this is a rare occurrence. And I prefer it be a rare occurrence, but if there's something that, we can prevent, it's like, hey, make sure that, your friends have lunch. Hey, I don't think anyone would ever um, really, but this really goes back to knowing your friends, knowing your people. And, if you know that this is possible, you might start to prepare, right? Which leads me to prevention. And you'll see me talk about prevention in a lot of these chats. Prevention. So let's prevent hypoglycemic encephalopathy together. But with that being said, as always, my sources will be here and the description below. I'd like it if you like this video, maybe comment on the new format, maybe subscribe if you like this. I try to put out this information. I try to keep it educational. I try to keep it engaging. And if you have any feedback, I would enjoy to hear that. But until then, I hope everyone has a wonderful day.